Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Oleksandra, and I am the head of Ukraine Forum here at Chatham House. We are gathering here today at what I believe is a historic moment for Europe to discuss a very important element of our common future, which is Ukraine's fight for just peace. Our event is fully on the record. It's online with a lot of people joining from around the world, and here in central London at St. James's Square on the third anniversary almost of Russian unprovoked invasion of sovereign and independent Ukraine. It's 1090th day of a total war that Russia is waging. Today is a special event not only because of who is with us in this room this evening, but also the emphasis on justice, which I think is the core of European civilization and human rights. We have a special guest today. One of them is Oleksandra Matviichuk, who is the Nobel Prize recipient in 2022 for her work at the Center for Civic Liberties. And also we have a war diaries exhibition, and that is bringing the evidence and voices of young Ukrainians, children and young adults. And two of those eyewitnesses are with us here. It's Sofia Hlomakova and Vladislav Pyatin-Ponomarenko. They're with us, and they will be with us all the evening, and you can later discuss with them at the exhibition. But first, before we go right into the gist of it, I would like to invite Ambassador Zaluzhny, General Commander-in-Chief of Ukrainian Armed Forces between 2021 and 24, to say a couple of greeting words to us all. Ambassador, please.
Good evening. Thank you very much. Thank you for your invitation. It's a really great honor for me to be here in this place. Dear guest, dear my fellow countrymen, first of all, I'm glad to speak to you today in Chatham House, but really every time I come here, I always get a little worried because it's a very important analytical center. What about this event? This event is about something very important for us: Ukraine's fight for just peace. For more than 10 years, we have fought to survive and to be free. Russia's aggression is not just against Ukraine. It's a threat to everyone who believes in justice. Our fight is for Ukraine and for a world where laws matter. This event is even more special because of exhibition War Diaries, unspoken voices of Ukrainian children. These children have lived through war. These stories show the true cost of war. We must listen to them because they tell the truth about pain, loss, and hope. I thank the organizers, especially Chatham House, Ms. Arisa Lutsevich and Kristina Hranovska Foundation for this exhibition. A big thank you to the United States for supporting our fighting. I am also grateful to Oleksandra Matviichuk, who will give today's main speech. She works hard to document war crimes and protect human rights. Her work is important for justice and making sure that criminals are punished. Peace is not just ending the war. It means restoring Ukraine's borders, holding criminals accountable, and making sure this never happens again. Only then we can have real peace and safety for all. Ukraine is still fighting. We thank you for your support, kindness, and belief in justice. Together, we will stop evil and stand for that is right. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. And now I would like to introduce Oleksandra. I met her, I think, 12 years ago when she was leading Euromaidan SOS, which was a legal group, lawyers in Kyiv, who were trying to defend those who were abused by then President Yanukovych's riot police, those who were waving the European Union flags and were brutally beaten against the laws that were copycat from Russian autocratic repressive system. And Oleksandra organized that network, and she deeply impressed me at that time with her kind of very quiet determination, I would say. So when the Nobel Committee decided to award her organization the Nobel Peace Prize, I think that was a very powerful message to all of us. She's also, after the full-scale invasion in 2022, launched an initiative, Tribunal for Putin. I think at that time, few even thought that this would be possible, an initiative that was documenting the international crimes committed in Ukraine. So I would like you to hear from Oleksandra what she has to say today in Chatham House at the 3rd anniversary of full-scale invasion of Ukraine. Oleksandra.
Thank you very much for providing me a floor. It's a huge honor for me to address to this distinguished audience. I'm a human rights lawyer, and I'm documenting war crimes in this war which Russia has launched against Ukraine for 11 years. We are not just documenting violations of Geneva and Hague Conventions. We are documenting something more essential. We are documenting human pain. Some people asked me, why did it happen? Why did it happen to me? And how do I can live on? This war turns people into the numbers. So what we are literally doing, we are returning people their names, because people are not numbers, and life of each person matters. I would like to share with you one story. This is a story which wasn't recorded by myself, because for me there is existing red line. I have never gathered testimonies from children. And that's why I encourage you to go and to see this exhibition, because children speak by themselves about what they witnessed in this war. But this story was recorded by my colleague. And this is a story of 10-year-old boy, Ilya Matviichuk from Mariupol. When Russians tried to siege the city, they didn't allow International Committee of Red Cross to open green corridors and to evacuate civilians. Hence, Ilya and his mother, like other people in Mariupol, had to hide in a basement of their residential buildings from Russian shelling. They melted snow to make water, and they made fires to cook at least some food. But when supplies ran out, they were forced to go out, and suddenly they appeared in the center of Russian shelling. Ilya's mother was hit in her head, and the boy's leg was torn. With the last strength, his mother took her son to the friend apartment. It was no medical assistance, because prior to this, Russians deliberately destroyed maternity hospital and entire medical infrastructure in the city. So in this friend apartments, they just lie down in a couch and hugged each other. They were lying like this for several hours. And this 10-year-old boy, Ilya, told to my colleague that his mother died and got frozen right in his arms. As a human rights lawyer, I have a question. How we people who live in 21st century will defend human beings, their lives, their freedom, their human dignity? Can we rely on the law? Or does just brutal force matter? And the answer to this question is important not just for people in Ukraine, in Iran, in Syria, in Venezuela, in Nicaragua, or Sudan. The answer to this question will define our common future, because we are losing freedom in the world. Last year, half of the population in the world went to election, but 80% of people in the globe live in non-free or partially free societies. It means that people who have a real right to vote are minority. And the problem is not that, in fact, that in authoritarian countries, the space for freedom is shrinking to the size of the prison cell. The problem is that even in developed democracies, people start to call into questions the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And there is a reason for this. The current generations in well-developed democracies, they inherited their freedom from their parents. They have never fought for it. They became consumers of democracy. They start to perceive human rights for granted. They consider freedom a possibility to make a choice between different cheeses in supermarket. In addition to this, we have witnessed the rapid development of new technologies. Modern people spend more and more time in digital reality. But this digital reality is overloaded with fakes and disinformation, and it's led to a situation that people start to lose their ability to distinguish between truth and lie. And it leads to a situation that people, even from the small communities, they have no shared reality. Without shared reality, we have no common actions. Without common actions, we can lose our democracy. I'm here to tell you several things, which is my lessons learned from these 11 years of the war. And first is unpunished evil grows. Last year, my friends and colleagues, Russian Human Rights Center Memorial, published a report. They analyzed the tactics of Russian army in Syria, in Chechnya, and in Ukraine. And they told, this is the same war crime playbook. The chain of wars, chain of crimes, and chain of impunity. All this hell, which we now face in Ukraine, is a result of total impunity which Russia enjoyed for decades. Russian troops commit horrible crimes in different countries, but they have never been punished. They believe they can do whatever they want. We must break the circle of impunity and demonstrate justice. Because justice is precondition to peace in our part of the globe, where Russia, for decades, used the war as a tool how to achieve its geopolitical interests, and for decades uses war crimes as the methods how to win this war. Second, we are dealing with the formation of entire authoritarian bloc. I live in Kiev, and my native city is constantly being shelled, not just by Russian rockets, but also by Iranian drones. China helps Russia to avoid sanctions and import technologies critical to warfare. North Korea sent to Russia more than 1 million artillery shells and deployed their troops to Russia. All these regimes have something in common. All these regimes, which captured power in their own countries, have the same idea what human being is. They consider people as object of control. They deny them in rights and freedoms. Democracies, in opposite, they consider people and their rights and freedoms to be the highest values. And there is no way to negotiate it, because only existence of free world, always provided threats to dictatorship, to lose their power. And that is why, for Russia, and for Russia authoritarian alliance like China, Iran, North Korea, Ukraine is not a goal. Ukraine is a tool, how to break international order, how to dictate its rules to entire international community, and even forcibly changed internationally recognized borders. Third, the existing international order is collapsed. I don't know how historians in future will call this historical period, but we happen to live in very turbulent times. The international order, which is based on UN Charter and international law, is collapsing before our eyes. The work of Security Council is paralyzed. Now it's easy to predict that such fires like wars will emerge more and more often in different parts of the globe because the international wiring is faulty and sparks are everywhere. And when we speak about Russian war of aggression against Ukraine, we also have to be confident that it's not just a war between two states. This is a war between two systems, authoritarianism and democracy. And with this war, Putin attempts to convince the entire world that freedom, democracy, rule of law, human rights are fake values because they couldn't protect anyone during the war. I want you to understand that freedom is not just articles in UN conventions and declarations. It's something more essential. I just recently read the articles of Mansky about North Korean soldiers. You know that it's Ukrainian film producers who made a film about North Korea. And I found his reflections very interesting. He told that being in North Korea, he understood that there is no love here. Because when you have no freedom, you can't fulfill the order of your hearts, and love ceases to exist. You start to behave on the level of your basic human instincts. And that's why North Korean soldiers love their dictators much more than their families. And that's why freedom is not just articles in UN conventions and declarations, but it's a space where freedom can exist. Fourth, we need peace, but not occupation. Sometimes I found myself in a very ridiculous position that I have to prove someone that Ukrainians want peace. I assure you, Ukrainians want peace much more than anyone else because war is horrible. But peace doesn't come when a country which was invaded stops fighting. That's not peace, that's occupation. And occupation is just another form of the war. I also know that some people think that the war is so horrible that probably occupation at least decreases human suffering. It's not true. Occupation doesn't decrease human suffering. Occupation makes human suffering invisible. Occupation is not the end of human suffering. In opposite, for the majority of people, occupation is just the beginning of human suffering. I know what I'm talking about. I'm documenting war crimes. I know that people who live under Russian occupation, they live in gray zone. They have no tools how to defend their rights, their freedom, their property, their lives, their children, their beloved ones. We have 1,600,000 children under Russian occupation, under constant threat to be separated with their families and forcibly deported to Russia. Russia taught these children through Russian textbook, where Ukraine does not exist. Russia banned Ukrainian language and culture, so these children can't speak their native language. Russia invited Russian militaries to school, and from kindergarten, they raise these children with a thought that the war is something like adventure, because we can repeat is the main slogan of the end of the Second World War for Russia. We got a lot of information about sports and educational clubs where Ukrainian children used military uniform, marching, and teach how to use weapons. So Russia is preparing from the 1,600,000 Ukrainian children a new generation of Russian soldiers. And it's very naive to think that it will be a new generation of Russian soldiers to fight only with Ukraine. And what was shocking for me, because I know this erosion of identity and militarization trend very clearly, but only when I have started to speak with these children and with the experts who provide rehabilitation for Ukrainian children who returned from occupation deportation, I understand another important thing. Russia and the whole system in occupied territory, starting from kindergarten, they teach these children unquestionable obedience. Do you ever try to get the mobile phone from your teenager? The experts who deal with rehabilitation told that these children return their mobile phone without any question. So it's not just erosion of identity and militarization of the mind, it's also, if I may say so, reprogramming the Ukrainian children into authoritarian software. And this is something which is going on now in Ukrainian territories. And that's why it's not just a situation that poor Ukrainians are suffering in occupied territories. It's something which has a clear link with security. I would like to share you one story. This is a story of my colleague. She's a journalist. She's originally from a small city, from occupied region. And she told me, because everyone knows each other in the small city, that in her school, every morning, like in all other schools in occupied territories, children have to start with a singing Russian national anthem. And one child refused to sing it. And teacher once time started to ask, but why you don't sing the Russian national anthem? And the child responded, because I don't know the words. What the problem, told the teacher, go home and learn the words by heart. So next day, this teacher put this child in front of the whole class and obliged this child to sing the national Russian anthem. And instead to sing the Russian nation anthem, this child started to sing Ukrainian national anthem. I want you to remember this story, because if Ukrainian children under Russian occupation, being alone with occupiers, found a strength and courage to resist, we as adults, we have no right to say that we don't know what to do. We have to fight for these children and for these people. And what I want to say at the end, and this will be my fifth last point, people can make history. As a human rights lawyer, being in a situation when the law doesn't work, I know that even when you can't rely on the legal instruments, you can still rely on people. Because we get used to thinking through the categories of states and interstate organizations, but ordinary people have a much great impact that they can even imagine. Ordinary people can change history. And now we're in a very dangerous time. I just returned from the Munich Security Conference, and there are a lot of shocking news. So I want to share with you that 3 years ago, just exactly in that time, I was in Kiev when Russian troops tried to circle it. When not just Putin, but also international partners were confident that we have no potential to resist to such enormous opposing power. And I was witnessed how international organizations evacuated their personnel, even international humanitarian organizations. But ordinary people remained. And ordinary people started to do extraordinary things. It were ordinary people who helped to survive under artillery fire. It were ordinary people who took people out from the ruined cities. It were ordinary people who broke through the encirclement to provide humanitarian aid. And suddenly, it became obvious that ordinary people fighting for their freedom and human dignity are stronger than even the second army in the world. And I'm here to say that despite everything, the story of Ukraine is a life-affirming story because these dramatic times raise hope. Because when freedom is denied, it's become powerfully break and speak through the concrete every individuals. And I'm here to say that our future is unclear, but also not pre-written, which means that we have a chance. We have a chance to fight for future, which we want for us and for our children. And I'm here to say about hope. Because hope, it's not a confidence that everything will be fine, but this is a deep understanding that all our efforts have a huge meaning. Thank you very much.
Well, I think we should all take a moment just to all think what resonated the most in what you said. To me personally, I think it's what you said about the hidden courage to resist evil and the power of an individual to stand up for the right of a neighbor, or a child, or a community, even in the face of failing institutions. And I think for Ukraine, when you meet Ukrainians like Oleksandra or others, or Sofia, or Vlad, or there's Tyra, I see the well-known paramedic here, one thing that clearly distinguishes Ukrainians now from others is they have no fear of Russia. And I think fear is a deeply paralyzing feeling that is a very bad advisor in today's world. So I encourage all of us to listen to what Ukrainians have to say. And I'd like to start with my question before I turn into audience to Oleksandra. Of course, we can't dismiss what's happening after Munich and this track and hope or maybe delusion of some people about negotiations, that you can negotiate your way out of this war with Putin and his regime and the kind of Russia that he built, the way you also described. Can you tell us what would be really disturbing for you when you see in news coming out about those negotiations between Russia and United States, and especially with the focus on justice? Because I personally have heard many times a provocative, or I think even misleading question: do you want peace or do you want justice?
First of all, I think it's very important to understand the real goal of Russia and to accept this reality seriously. Because Putin started this large-scale war, not because he wanted to occupy just more part of Ukrainian land. Putin started this war because he wanted to occupy and destroy the entire Ukraine and go further. He used Ukraine like a bridge to Europe because he dreams about forcible restoration of Russian Empire. And don't be naive. Putin dreams about his legacy, and he don't want to be written in his world history like person who occupied Avdiivka, or person who occupied Bakhmut. I'm confident that majority of people here can't find Avdiivka, Bakhmut on the map. He started this war with historical logic. And the problem is that after 3 years of large-scale war, he doesn't refuse from his goal. Because human life is the cheapest resources in Russian state. And this which we have to take seriously. It means that in order to achieve sustainable peace, first which we have to think is security guarantees. Mm-hmm. We need a real security guarantees which makes this goal not just to be postponed for several months or for several years, but impossible for Putin to achieve. And also, plus to security guarantees, we need to return human dimension into all these peace negotiations. I'm really shocking. Politicians speak about natural minerals, about territories, about ceasefires, about a lot of things, which is important for sure, but they don't speak about people. What will be with more than 20,000 Ukrainian children who were illegally deported to Russia? What will be with thousands and thousands illegally detained civilians and prisoners of the war who daily subjected to torture and ill treatment? What will be with Ukrainian women under Russian occupation under the constant threat to be raped? What will be with people in occupied territories in general? And that's why justice is so important. Because while we have no possibility to release these territories for current moment by military force, we still have an obligation to make impact. And what justice is about? Politicians sometimes think that justice is something only about the past, because you prosecute someone for something which has already been done. Or they think that justice is also about the future, because it can be a strong signal to the future that if you will commit something similar, you will be also prosecuted. But what they don't understand, that justice has a huge impact to present. What do I mean? I spoke with hundreds of people who survived Russian captivity. They told me how they were beaten, raped, smashed into wooden boxes, their fingers were cut, their nails were torn away, their nails were drilled, they were electrically shocked through their genitalia. One woman told me how her eye was dug out with a spoon. They also told me that their perpetrators were confident that they have never been punished, because they did the same in Chechnya, in Moldova, in Syria, in Mali, in Libya, and nothing happened. If we start decisive legal actions, even if part of Russians start to be doubted that probably this time they will not avoid responsibility, this doubt will be converted in chilling effect of brutality of human rights violations. And because we speak about ongoing war and occupation, it means that with decisive legal actions, we can save thousands, thousands, and thousands of lives.
Thank you very much. I encourage you to start thinking about your questions, and there will be microphones around in the audience, and maybe we'll get a bit more light. And one question I have specifically related to what you say, decisive legal action, is the news that we had recently about this special tribunal that will be set based on the agreement between Council of Europe and Ukraine. Can you just briefly update us on that? Does it give you confidence that this decisive legal action can take place within that framework?
It's a very important announcement because the problem is that International Criminal Court has no jurisdiction over the crime of aggression in situation of Russian war against Ukraine. But everything which we documenting, it's a result of the leadership decision of Putin and top political officials and high military command of Russian state to start this war. And that is why Ukraine and the alliance, as well as Ukrainian civil society, all these 3 years were pushing for creation a special tribunal on aggression to fill this accountability gap and to provide punishment. And this is not just important for Ukraine. Let's think logically. If we want to prevent wars in the future, we have to punish the states and their leaders who start such wars in present. It's a common sense. But in the whole history of humankind, we have only one such a precedent. It was Nuremberg trial. All other tribunals, which you probably heard, like Rwanda Tribunal, Yugoslavia Tribunal, or Special Court in Sierra Leone, I will simplify it a little bit, but it was courts where people were tried because they kill each other not according to the norms. Mm-hmm. We have to put the war under the legal frame. Yeah, and that is why it's so important announcement. Two things which we have to ask politicians about the special tribunal on aggression. First, will this tribunal have a power to prosecute Putin? Because inside the core group was a lot of discussion how to create this tribunal, like international court or hybrid court. And the difference is that hybrid court has no jurisdiction to overcome immunities, which Putin has according to international law, which provide a little bit absurd situation that we created special tribunal to prosecute for the crime of aggression, and this tribunal will have no power to prosecute the most important and the most responsible person. And second question, which we have to ask, what is the timing of aggression in accordance to the special tribunal? Because this war started not in February 2022. This war started in February 2014, when Ukraine got the chance for the quick democratic transition after the collapse of the authoritarian regime due to revolution of dignity. And in order to stop us on this way, Putin invaded. And if this tribunal will have the jurisdiction only from 2022, which this means that we left behind the legal frame Crimea, part of Donetsk and Luhansk regions, and dozens and thousands of people who suffered from all 8 years of this war.
Thank you. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to bring the microphones to you. So if you can please raise your hand, introduce yourself. If you're a Chatham House member, maybe you can also say what else do you do. This is not a full-time job, so it'd be interesting to know. And yes, I see gentlemen there.
Thank you very much, Ibrahim Aziz. My question about what you mentioned about, sorry.
Yeah, affiliation.
Yeah, I'm a member of Chatham House.
Okay.
Easy one.
Easy one.
You mentioned there is a conflict between two systems, authoritarian and democracy. And which I got from your speeches, you have to support the democracy system and against the authoritarian system, which Russia is leading that. But right now we are speaking in this hall. There is two meetings, one in Paris, one in Saudi Arabia, and maybe tomorrow for Saudi Arabia between United States and Russia. My question is, does you count in the U.S. is from the democratic system or not?
Yeah,
and if you are counting the democratic system, how they are dealing, and Trump says, giving some lands or something like that to stopping the war because the people dying in both sides. Thank you very much.
It's a good question. It's one of the things a lot of people are pondering after J.D. Vance's speech in Munich, whether America could still be considered a democratic system. What do you think?
Returning to Trump's words that he cares about people dying in this war, and that's why he came up with the idea that he has to stop it. I think if President Trump cares about people dying in this war, he has also to be cared about people who die in Russian prison. He also to be cared about people in occupied territories in general. And this is our task, to remind politicians that we want to return values and human dimension into negotiation tables, not to be focused only on transactional things. If we will return to Vice President once speech during the Munich Security Conference, he didn't speak about Ukraine. He spoke about his vision, what is a threat to democracy in Europe. But on my mind, very important in this turbulent time, not to distract attention from the main focus. And main focus is that main threat to Europe is Russia. Because Russia is empire, and empire has a center, but has no borders. Empire always tries to expand. I see it even from my human rights work. When I interviewed people who survived Russian captivity, they told me, Russians see their future like this. First, we will occupy Ukraine, and then, together with you, we will go to conquer in other countries. And this means that regardless whether or not European politicians have a bravery to admit it, people in European Union are safe only because Ukrainians are still fighting. And this means that today in Paris, European leaders has to demonstrate unity in understanding what is the main threat to Europe. And we need proactive role of Europe in all this peace negotiation process, because it's ridiculous to decide the destiny of continent without Europe itself.
Yeah, and this builds, if you can develop a little bit this subject on the Western agency and what is needed at this moment. It comes from my colleague, James Sher, who is Italian, I imagine. He says, Donald Trump and his core supporters know nothing about Ukrainian history and do not care about it. Vice President Svans, I don't care about Ukraine, brackets. What is the most direct and effective way for Western leaders to respond to this, you think?
Probably they have to remind that that this war and roots of this war is a huge offense of Russia, who lose the Cold War with United States. And probably they have to remind that I'm being bombarded by Iranian drones, not because Iranians care about Ukrainians, but because Iran care how to decrease the American global leadership in the world. So, okay, don't use a language of values, which is my language. Let's speak about transactions. Let's speak more pragmatically. President Trump and his image is built on strengths. He can't be seen more weaker than President Putin.
And how can Europe kind of help America be strong? Is there something that, because we do know these questionnaires that the Americans send to Europe, how can we help you to be strong vis-a-vis Putin? But perhaps there's also something that Europe can help to achieve the strength through that you spoke about, that Trump is trying to project. So far it's just the wishful thinking. It has to come with something, right? The strengths.
Europe have to make their own lessons learned and their own home tasks. And I was very glad to hear the official statement of Prime Minister of Great Britain that if it's necessary, Great Britain is ready to send their troops to Ukraine as a security guarantee to maintain sustainable peace. And I think that when we are observing the collapse of international order, we all have to step beyond the zone of comfort and do something.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's see what comes out of that summit in Paris. Beyond, they've already said after Brussels that it's a common responsibility for our security, and that included statements of foreign ministers of Ukraine and other European states. But let's, yes, please, gentleman over there. Do I see any? We will give you the microphone. One second.
Thank you. Rain Lepner. I'm from Saskatchewan, but I'm also a member of the Estonian Central Council, and for 30 years I've gone back and forth between Estonia and Canada. I think what we're talking really about is a distinction between an armistice and a peace. A just peace has to include reparations and the return of Ukrainian children. But what we're talking about, pragmatics and security with hundreds of thousands of soldiers, is really an armistice like in Korea. And I would make one more point. Everybody seems to talk about the border around Ukraine and Russia, but you also have to put peacekeepers through the Belarusian border as well. Otherwise, it will be just another Maginot Line.
That's a good point. And President Zelensky in Munich specifically talked about these 15 divisions that Russia plans to deploy in Belarus. Exactly, not perhaps on the Russian-Ukrainian border. Thank you for making that.
Forgive
Do you
me,
have a
I'll just-
question? Or?
I have one more
Yeah.
question. The issue, President Zelensky said it, and Gabriel Landesbergs of Lithuania said it at the Helsinki Commission, said, we're dealing with Russia now, and if we don't deal with Russia properly, we will have to do this again in 5 years. And that means more military expenditures. But you have to be prepared to do this without the United States.
Yeah.
Zelensky was absolutely right. It's time to raise a European army.
Yes, thank you very much. Do you want to comment or show?
I just, based on what we just heard, and thank you very much for your comments, would like to remind that it was Russia who was always proactive. It was Russia who has its own strategy, not well-developed democracies. And Russia committed something horrible, then presented it like a fait accompli, like new normality, and pushed the whole international community to reckon with it. And that's why we always failed, because we was reactive. We was never proactive. We has no strategy towards Russia. So now it's a time to develop it.
Yes, please.
Hi, I'm Tony Borden from the Institute for Foreign Peace Reporting, and great to see you, Oleksandra, and thanks, Risa, for this wonderful event. I remember it was a year ago that we met at this anniversary in your office in Kyiv, and we talked about fatigue, among other things. And I really don't think we expected ourselves to be here, but perhaps we sort of did, actually, because it wasn't very optimistic even then. And I wondered if you could just comment, since civil society in Ukraine has been so important to enabling the country to be where it is now, if you could just give us some flavor for those of us who aren't in the country at the moment, how people are feeling with this news and with this time and with the prospects ahead. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony.
Thank you very much. It's very difficult to be in large-scale war for so huge period of time. Because war probably is the most horrible things which just can happen in a human life. To live in a large-scale war means that you live in total uncertainty. You can't plan not just your day, you can't plan your next several hours. You have no idea what will happen. To live during the large-scale war, it means that you live in constant fear for your beloved ones. Because even if your members of the family are not in trenches, there is no safe place where you can hide from the Russian rockets. When we go to bed, we have no guarantees that we will get up next morning, because this war is a lottery. You have no idea what next residential building will be hit by Russian rockets this night. So it's very exhausting. And that's why mood of Ukrainians is always up and down, but it can't be always high, because when I open my Facebook belt, it's numerous announcement of death of people whom I know personally. And even after 3 years, I can't get used to it, because it's not normal. But I have my colleague, she's Ukrainian writer, probably you know her, Larisa Denisenko. And she told, you know, when we are down, we are not down. We are in emotional trenches. We are here to retreat, to regroup, and to go further, because despite the mood, we will continue to do the right thing. Putin openly says, there is no Ukrainian nation, there is no Ukrainian language, there is no Ukrainian culture. But 10 for 11 years.
No.
We have been documenting how these words converted in horrible practice when Russian troops physically exterminate active local people, mayors, journalists, children writers, musicians, teachers, environmentalists, any active people of community. How they banned Ukrainian language and culture and robbed and destroyed Ukrainian cultural heritage. How they take Ukrainian children to Russia to bring them up as Russians. We have no other choice. If we stop resisting, we will cease to exist.
Yes, please.
Thank you very much. Nomi Bar-Yakov, the Geneva Center for Security Policy. You were absolutely brilliant and explained very clearly the holistic approach to peace. And I would just wonder if you could very kindly elaborate a little bit about how to bring in the humanity, the values, and also the security guarantees. What would you like to see, coming out of Europe, of the Paris meeting, and what kind of drafting would you like to see that would include those three elements, the security, the humanity, the justice? Thank you very much. The values.
Thank you very much for this question. I think that dramatic times need real courage, real leadership, and real responsibilities. And I hope that European leaders will start to design a comprehensive complex of measures of deterrence and reactions which will have the same impact as Article 5 of Washington Treaty. And I'm not military expert. I can't provide you the clear answer how it may look like, but what is visible for me being in Kyiv, that we need to do something with our sky. Yeah. And I think that the joint patrolling with NATO and Ukraine can close our sky and prevent Russians of this deliberate destruction of civil infrastructure. Just yesterday, they hit city Mykolaiv and 100,000 people now without heating. It's very cold in Ukraine. Yeah. Schools are freezing. Residential buildings are freezing. Hospitals are freezing there. It's humanitarian catastrophe. It's not preparation for peace. Sorry. But I will switch to another point where I have more competence is justice-related issues. I worked with people affected by this war directly, and I know that they see justice very differently. For some people, justice means to see their perpetrators behind the bars. For another people, justice means to get compensations, and without compensations, they will feel unsatisfied. For some people, justice means just to know the truth. What happened with their beloved ones? For another people, justice means a possibility to be publicly heard and to get this public recognition that something which happened with them and their families is not just immoral, but illegal. And we have to create a comprehensive justice strategy with different elements, different institutions to reach all these different needs. And it's essential. In autumn 2022, Ukrainians were asked, what will be for you the huge disappointment after the war ends? And the 65% of Ukrainians answered that the main disappointment for them will be impunity for Russian war crimes. Mm-hmm. So it's not just my wish as a human rights lawyer, it's demand of millions of people who suffered in this war. And if we don't find a way how to reach this demand properly, the demand for justice can switch to demand for revenge.
I would like to apologize that I cannot take a lot more questions, including from the online and from the audience, because I think it nicely ties into what we want to do next, where you are saying about the possibility to be heard. And I would like to give a floor to Hrystyna Granovska, who is the founder of Granovska Foundation and the founder of the War Diaries exhibition, because that is a small attempt at justice. It may seem, maybe small for us, but maybe it's huge and actually big for those young children and children of Ukraine who are represented in this exhibition. Christina, over to you.
As Oleksandra told us, ordinary people are doing changes. We are small, ordinary organizations that are showing to the world what actually Ukrainian children are feeling and living this life through the war every day. So in 1952, here in United Kingdom, the English translation of the diary of Anna Frank was published. Anna was a Jewish girl who documented life under Nazi occupation in Netherlands. She did not live to see her country liberations. She died in concentration camp, but her words outlined her. Her diary became the voice of an entire generation that was silent. This story was not supposed to repeat itself, but on February 24, 2022, it did make the same story in Ukraine. So in the reception, you will have the possibility to see the exhibition that will tell you the stories about Ukrainian children through diaries, drawings, footage they captured themselves. There are not just words on papers. There are the voices of children who saw the war by their own eyes. They are about pain, loss, and fight for survival, about experience that will stay with these children forever. So hundreds of thousands of Ukrainian children have witnessed the war, not by books, but by their own eyes. Near 600 children have been killed. 1,700 children have been injured. Near 2,000 children are officially already missed. 20,000 Ukrainian children have been deported and forcibly displaced to Russia, as been already described by Oleksandra. These are only the confirmed numbers, but behind each one is a shattered life, a diary that will never be completed. And it depends on the world whether their voices will be heard or become just a distant echo of the war, fading thousands of kilometers away. So United Kingdom understands the importance of preserving memory. And today we are here together to ensure that these children's stories, children's voices do not remain just pages on the past. We must hear them, and we must them led to change the future. Here with us today is, do you hear me? Here today with us is Sofia Hromakova. She was under occupation in Mariupol and lost her father, who joins the ranks of the territorial defense force at the city. And Sofia expressed her emotional experience in the paintings. You will have the possibility to speak with Sofia and to see the paintings on the reception upstairs. Also here we have Vladislav Pyatin-Ponomarenko, a young boy who spent more than 75 days in blockade in Mariupol. And he shot the documentary film about his experience. And at the end, we ask you to share the stories of the children you hear and see here at the exhibition among your friends, colleagues, and your social network. War diaries are not just memories. War diaries are the evidence. They are the voices that shape history. A history cannot be erased. So, and every voice must be heard. Slava Ukraini. Would you like to transfer a word to? And also, I would like to invite Jack Gleason, an Irish actor who helps and supports Ukraine a lot and continue to help Ukraine. Now we will have a possibility, the original diary of a small boy from Mariupol to be read by Jackson. Thank you.
Yehor Kravstov, 10 years old, Mariupol. War. Sunday 3rd. I had a good sleep. Woke up and smiled. Also, my grandfather died on the 26th. I have a wound on my back. My sister's skin was torn out. She had a head wound. My mother's flesh was torn out of her arm, and now she has a hole in her leg. I'm 8 years old. My sister is 15 and my mother is 38. We have to make a dressing bandage for our wounds. My mother is the first, I'm the second, my sister is the third. Monday 4th. I woke up. Well, I smiled as it was yesterday, and so on. Grandma went to get some water. She returned home. By the way, my birthday is coming up soon. And both of my dogs and my grandmother, Galia, died. And the beloved city of Mariupol. Everyone is welcome to join the War Diaries exhibition upstairs with the drinks reception. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jack, for giving a voice to a young Ukrainian boy. Thank you very much for being with us. I would like to say that you can visit the exhibition not only today, but throughout this week. It will be here in Chatham House. You can register through the website. If you go on our website and Google War Diaries, there are slots where you can sign up and come, perhaps in the quiet. There'll be less people for sure. You can engage with the content and see what you take out of it. I would like to thank Oleksandra for making a journey. She circles the globe carrying the message. And one quote that came to my mind was also about the antonym of forgetting is not remembering, but justice. So what you are doing is bringing the evidence for that justice. And I am confident that it will be achieved with the help of amazing Ukrainian civil society organizations like Christina and the core group of European states that is committed to make it happen. So thank you for coming today. We would like inviting you now upstairs for an informal discussion, to visit the exhibition, and to share your feedback from today's event. Thank you for coming. Thank you for joining us online.